Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's Life Sciences lesson. My name is Samantha Ragunanan. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. You may WhatsApp us on 079 454 9535. The number again, 079 454 9535. You may send WhatsApp messages but no voice notes or videos. So let's get started. So grade 12, today our lesson is on reproduction in vertebrates. This is such a fascinating section. It is so interesting, and it's got to do with courtship behavior. It's got to do with how our bodies work during reproduction and how it accommodates for reproduction. So I think you're really going to enjoy today's session. Okay, so let's get to it. As usual, we need important documents. We cannot just study from our notebook. We need a variety of activities, like we need different types of questions which you will get from the past year papers. We need broadcasting and web lessons. The web lessons are going to actually help you. If you don't understand the topic, then you can go to video lessons, and there you're going to have an explanation to reiterate what you don't understand. And then you got Mind the Gap. So Mind the Gap was designed to pass you, to help you to pass in grade 12. So all the notes are simplified there on reproduction in vertebrates, and it is easy to understand. So that is a very, very important tool that you need to pass grade 12. You need exam guidelines and textbooks, of course, and then also you can go to the www.education.gov.za. On this website you will also find past year papers from previous years, as well as notes and resource material. So as usual, we start with our recipe, which is the exam guideline. So even though this topic, and it's very important when you start a topic, you need to know how many marks that topic counts for in the exam. So this one is 8 marks. And those 8 marks, it might seem like a little to you, but because the topic is such a simple topic and it's so easy to remember, those are 8 marks that you really want to get. Okay, so let's look at it. So if we look at the diversity means different reproductive strategies. What does this mean? It means the role of the following reproductive strategies in animals in maximizing reproductive success in different environments. So what that basically means is fertilization needs to take place. Okay, that is the purpose of reproduction, because to fertilize the organism so that we can have continuation of the species. But there's different environments. When you talk about environments, we're talking about environments outside the body and environments inside the body. So that is where external fertilization and internal fertilization come into play. You need to know the definition of ovipary, of ovovivipary and vivipary. It sounds so fancy, but it is so easy to understand. Then you need to know the amniotic egg. So the amniotic egg is very, very similar to your normal chicken's egg. And this egg has components which serve to supply the embryo with nutrients, with oxygen, remove waste, same like our bodies. Okay? Then you have precocial and altricial development, as well as parental care. So besides knowing how many marks it counts for and what you need to learn in each section of this topic, you also need to know which paper it is found in. So it is found in paper 1. So there's no sense in you studying this for paper 2. You need to, even in your notebook, you need to mark off which topics are in paper 1 and which topics are in paper 2. Because if you learn the wrong topics, you're going to be in big, big trouble. Okay? What are we going to focus on? External and internal fertilization. So this for me is very, very important, because we need to know where the male fertilizes the female gamete. Then ovipary and vivipary and ovovivipary, the amniotic egg, precocial, altricial development, and parental care, like we mentioned in the exam guideline. But we're going to zone in on each one of these topics so that we can see what is going on. So let's talk about external fertilization. I'm going to compare external fertilization with internal fertilization. So, like the name suggests, external, okay? When you see an exit sign, it's the way to go out, isn't it? So, external takes place outside. This fertilization takes place outside the female's body, okay? It takes place outside the female's body. And internal fertilization, it takes place where? In the female's body. Do you see how easy it is? So external, outside the female's body, internal, the fertilization takes place inside. And what exactly is fertilization? You cannot say fusion. That term is not allowed. You need to use the proper biological terminology, and you need to say fertilization. What exactly is fertilization? There, we got the ovum. There's the ovum, and we don't say egg cell. An egg, it can be a very general reference. We're talking about a gamete, and the female gamete is called the ovum. So we need to use the correct terminology, because if we're going to say egg, they're going to mark it wrong, and we don't want that. So we got the ovum, and it is fertilized by the sperm cell. And there we get, so the ovum is haploid and the sperm cell is haploid, and then we get a diploid zygote, okay? So we're familiar with these terms, and we're familiar with the haploid, diploid scenario because we've just finished meiosis. So we understand how this process occurs. So for now, we need to know that there's external fertilization, and we need to know that there's internal fertilization, okay? So let's talk about external fertilization. What are the advantages and disadvantages? So now what we're going to do in the next few slides, we're going to weigh which one is more easier or less troublesome. Is it internal fertilization or external fertilization? We're going to look at external fertilization, and we're going to see what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages, okay? So let's talk about external fertilization. No additional energy is needed for parental care or formation of the protective layer. So when we talk about external fertilization, we're usually talking about like reptiles, fish, and all of that sort of thing. What usually happens in external fertilization? It usually happens in the presence of water. Most of the time, it's necessary for water to be present so that the sperm can reach the ovum. So what happens in a normal scenario is that the female will swim, and then she will lay her eggs, and then the male will come and swim afterwards and deposit the sperm over those eggs. And as you can tell, that because she lays the eggs on the outside of her body, that is why we call it external fertilization. Had the eggs been in her body and the male fertilizes it, then it would have been internal fertilization. So there's no additional energy needed for parental care, because what's happening there? The female fish lays the eggs. The male fish deposits the sperm over the eggs. So what's happened? Those eggs are now laying at the bottom of the ocean. And those eggs are now going to hatch a little later on. And then we're going to have young fish developing from those eggs, okay? So as you can imagine, having it been external fertilization, there's a lot of dangers involved, because it's other fish that feed on smaller fish, okay? So there is no additional energy needed for parental care. So the female lays the eggs and she moves on. She doesn't stay there and looks after the eggs or nurses these little fish and make sure that they can swim, make sure they're okay, make sure they have food. No, she doesn't. She just drops the eggs, the male drops the sperms, and they move on. So the fish are left to fend for themselves. So that is why they say there's no additional energy needed for parental care, because literally there is no parental care. The parents are long gone, they're swimming, okay? There's no need for a male to have a special organ to insert the sperm over the female's body. So when I think of it, I'm using the example of the fish because it's easy to remember. So when you are remembering internal and external fertilization, you need to, sorry, you need to visualize an example in your mind. So in our case now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the fish as an example because it's easy to remember. There's no need for the male. So the male doesn't have a copulatory organ. The male just deposits the sperm. He doesn't need to because it's just dropping the sperm on the egg, okay, or the ovum, sorry. And then chances of fertilization are enhanced by courtship display by fish. So before this fertilization takes place, there is courtship behavior. Now in human beings, we have courtship behavior. Like if a male wants to attract a female, or if they're going out to the mall, then maybe he'll put some nice perfume for the pheromones and a nice chemical enhancer, so that the female will turn around and look and say, oh, smelling so good, okay? Or the ladies would maybe dress up, maybe put some makeup and lipstick and dress up nicely, dress their best, because the outward appearance attracts the opposite sex. So that is the human being's courtship behavior. We know it today as dating, okay? That's the dating behavior. Back in the day, in the days in the Stone Age and all of that, they used to call it courting, okay? So that is where they get this word from. So chances of fertilization are enhanced by courtship display. So what is this courtship, this dating behavior? So the fish actually wave their fins in like a special way to attract the females to so that they can be involved in this fertilization process. So it's not just a chance meeting. They try to attract each other so that these eggs can be fertilized, okay? And then let's talk about the disadvantages. So those were the advantages, okay? Now the disadvantages of external. Now we're still talking about the ovum being fertilized outside the body. Chances are very slim for the sperm to meet the ova. Think about it. If the egg has been, if the fish eggs have been dropped, and the male fish is swimming past, he needs to drop the sperm on there. But if there is a current or if there is a storm, those eggs might not be fertilized, as well as predators, which we will come to in a short while. So there's a lot of dangers so that the sperm does not meet the ova, okay? Predators eat the sperm. Yeah, some predators actually like to eat the sperm. It's crazy enough, eh? And ova before the fertilization can occur. And then strong currents carry the sperm cells away before fertilization can occur. And reproduction must take place in water. If you remember anything about today's lesson, remember, external fertilization, it needs water to occur. Internal fertilization does not need water. And they like to ask to see if you know which one needs water, which one doesn't need water. Okay, so it's very, very important that we remember that external fertilization needs water. Why does it need water? Because the sperm needs to swim to the ovum. So that is very, very important. Now remember, in internal fertilization, the sperm is inserted inside the female. So there is a mechanism of depositing it on the ovum. Okay, so let's move. Internal fertilization. So let's talk about infertilization. Internal fertilization has both advantages and disadvantages. So now can you see how these facts are so easy to remember? Because it's so interesting. So you can get this 8 marks. Ensure that the sperm cells come into contact with the ovum. So in internal fertilization, as you can see, there you have the one tortoise over the other tortoise, and it's inserting the sperm inside the female. So it has an organ to insert it inside the female. So it makes sure that that sperm is going to reach the ovum. There's no water current, there's no predators that can stop this process because it's already in a process of happening. The developing embryo is protected from predators and removed from the harsh environment. So there is also another difference between internal and external fertilization. In the previous scenario, when we spoke about external fertilization, we spoke about the fact that it's an uncontrolled environment. Okay? That means it can happen it most likely it happens in the water, and then there's predators, and there's weather to worry about, there's currents, there's lots of things that can happen. They can be eaten and things like that. So that is a very uncontrolled environment. But if you look at the inside of a female, it is a controlled environment. Okay, the developing embryo is protected from predators and removed from the harsh environment. So because the embryo and the, like we know it as a zygote, the diploid zygote, it's inside the female's body. The fact that it's inside a body, it's already got protection because the mother is protecting the offspring. The animal must have copulatory organ to insert the sperm cells into the female body. So here we know that there are advantages and the disadvantages, because if there is no copulatory organ to insert it inside the female, then this cannot occur. But the good thing about internal fertilization can take place anywhere. It can take place in the desert, it can take place in Antarctica, it can take place anywhere. So that is that is the advantage of internal fertilization. Okay, and then fewer eggs are produced. Fewer eggs are produced because there's very minimal risk involved here. Okay, so let's talk about external fertilization and internal fertilization. So this table is actually a summary of everything that we've just discussed. So it's just revision. Okay, so here you got, there's a nice little diagram here which I quite like. It is the union of the sperm and the eggs outside the female body. Can you see? They are the eggs there, the round little eggs, and that little cloud, I'm assuming, is the sperm, and it's deposited over the female's eggs, which lays into the water. That's external fertilization. So what you need to, when you're doing this section, you must remember in the exam, they won't just ask you question verbatim from the textbook or the notebook. They're going to give you a diagram and they're going to ask you maybe, is this internal fertilization or external fertilization? Is this advantageous to the organism or disadvantageous? So this is where you're going to weigh the two, okay? External fertilization. We know it requires water. That is the main thing you must remember about external fertilization, is that it requires water. And internal fertilization, no water required for fertilization. Remember, it's got the copulatory organ. Now, when you are recording or tabulating differences, you must remember you are comparing the same thing. So if you're comparing apples, you must be comparing apples. Here you are talking about water on the left hand side, you must be talking about water on the right hand side. You cannot mix up your facts because you are going to lose marks. Okay, now don't go write apples in the exams. Okay, we're talking about water and we're talking about fertilization. That was an example. So gametes, sperm and egg cells are released into the water. We had that scenario, we used the example of the fish. And in internal fertilization, now when you think about external fertilization, think about the fish. When you're thinking about internal fertilization, you think about human beings as an example. Think about things that you are familiar with, because that's going to help you to remember. Okay? Sperm cells are released into the female body. In external fertilization, many gametes are released. We know why, because of the risk factor. In internal fertilization, fewer gametes are released. And then in external fertilization, high mortality rates amongst young due to lack of protection. Remember the fish mother that just laid the eggs and moved on? She didn't stick around. So these eggs can easily desiccate, is just a fancy word for dry out, or be predated, meaning that other organisms will eat the fish eggs. You know, human beings as well. It's supposed to be a delicacy in some cultures. They charge a lot of money for something called caviar, and these are actually rotten fish eggs. So yeah, very interesting. And then lower mortality rates amongst the young in internal fertilization, because think about it, when you were a baby and you were not left to your own devices, you didn't feed yourself the bottle, or you didn't help yourself to walk, your parents helped you. There was parental care. And you didn't go and stick your finger in the socket, I hope not, because your mom would have stopped you and said, no, that is dangerous, my child. Okay? Maybe not in such a nice way, but she would have told you something like that. So, you had your parents' protection. So, protection is provided by the mother's body or hardened calcareous leathery shell. Calcareous or calcareous is basically a shell that is made up of calcium. Okay? Calcium gives it strength. So, the examples of animals that exhibit external fertilization, there's it, the fish, I wasn't lying, and amphibia. Amphibia is a species that lives both on land and in water. For example, like the frog. And then internal fertilization is reptiles such as snakes and birds, another example, and mammals such as humans. And then if we move on, we got ovipary, ovovivipary, and then we've got vivipary. Okay, so let's talk about each one. So when you are studying this, I want you to only consider the two first. Okay, so let's talk about ovipary. There is ovipary. So when you think of ovipary, I want you to think of the letter O, because eggs are laid. Okay, and I want you to remember the O for outside. So what does this mean? The egg is O-shaped. Okay, so that is the egg, and then the eggs are laid outside. So you must remember those two O's. So ovipary, the meaning. Now remember, whenever we want to remember terminology, we must always break the word up because it helps us to remember it. So there's ovi meaning egg, isn't it? And pari meaning bearing. So that means it's going to be, let's read what we have just discussed now. Eggs are laid like a chicken, eh? And the development of the embryo occurs outside the female's body. So, do you remember ovipary now? Ovipary. Ovi meaning egg, isn't it? O because an egg is laid, and O because the egg is laid outside the female's body. Very easy to remember. Now, we're going to do the flip side of it. Vivipary. Now, vivi, you can see IV there, is okay? IV comes from the word love. So, live. Okay? So, yeah, yes, you can assume that the young are born alive like human beings, isn't it? There's no, you were not, your mother didn't lay an egg and you were hatched. No, no, no. You were born alive. And then you started crying and the doctor carried you and all of those things, which you probably don't remember by now. But that is vivipary, where the young are born alive. Vivi meaning live or love, and pari obviously bearing. So let's read the definition of this. No eggs are present. That is obvious, okay? The young develop from the placenta. So when organisms, now remember, in ovipary, the organisms, the embryo is inside the egg. In vivipary, where is the organism? It's inside the mother's body. Okay? And there's a placenta. And I will show you a diagram a little later of the placenta. And that placenta gives nutrients to the organism inside the mother's body. And then we talk about the third option. The third option is ovovivipary. So do you see? It is a combination of ovipary and of vivipary. So you don't even have to learn this one. You know that it's got to do with eggs, because ovipary has got to do with eggs, and we know that vivipary, alive or live, born alive, means that there's going to be eggs and then there's something that's going to be hatched. It's going to be a combination. So let's look at the definition. Eggs develop and hatch within the female's body, and the young are born live. So when we are studying this, we will still first study with the definition of ovipary. You'll remember O for an egg, which is O-shaped, around, and the egg is laid outside. Do you see how we talk about outside the female's body, inside the female's body? So when you are using your explanations, you must relate it relative to the female's body, okay? So there you have ovipary, the eggs are laid. Then you got vivipary, they are born. No eggs are present, the young develop from the placenta and born alive. And then you have a combination of the two, where the eggs develop and hatch within the female's body and they are born alive. Now, when you look at ovipary, don't always assume that it's going to be, you know, like a chicken egg that's going to be inside the female. It's not always the case. Sometimes, like in organisms such as the shark, the egg actually has a leathery and a very soft membranous shell. If you look at this diagram here, this is actually ovovivipary in the sharks. Do you see that membrane? Can you see the baby shark? There it is inside, and it's getting all the nutrients from inside this egg. As we can see, it doesn't look like an egg, but the membrane surrounding it, we refer to it as an egg. So in the shark, or in organisms, certain organisms, they don't have a uterus to house the young or the offspring. So they have an egg inside the female's body, and the nutrients and the way that offspring survives is from the nutrients inside the egg. Okay? In the human being, or in vivipary, the female has a womb, and in that womb there is blood, there is a placenta for the transport of nutrients to the baby. That is why the gestation period of the pregnancy, or the pregnancy period, is for a certain amount of time. So because while the baby is inside the mom's body, it receives nutrients. Okay, such an interesting topic. There's no way you can forget this. Let's compare them now. So now we're going to summarize everything. Do you see this diagram here? There is the embryo and there is the placenta that I was talking about. Okay? And then here we got something hatching here. It looks like birds hatching. So we can obviously see that this would be ovipary, isn't it? And that would be vivipary. So in certain fish, the eggs are housed inside the female's body, and then they develop inside the female's body, and then they hatch inside, and then they are born alive. So learning with diagrams can be quite good because it helps you to remember a lot easier. So let's talk about fertilization. Okay, fertilization in ovipary can be either external or internal. In ovovivipary, it's internal, because remember, the egg is inside the female's body and the male deposits the sperm inside the female's body and it is fertilized. And vivipary, we know it is internal. The development of the embryo is developed external to the body, outside the body. So remember, in ovipary the eggs are laid, and in this egg there is nutrients. So sometimes certain organisms will incubate or keep the eggs warm or protected, like chickens. And even though the mother is not physically feeding the chick inside the egg, the chick inside the egg is getting the nutrients from inside the shell, which is usually the yolk sac. Inside, ovivipary takes place inside the body of the female, as mentioned. And vivipary, fertilization, takes place inside the female body, because remember, the male has a copulatory organ to deposit the sperm there. Nutrition, this is very important, and they like to always touch on this. So let's talk about the egg itself. There's yolk inside the egg, in an egg, because this is ovipary, of nutrition for the developing embryo, and is usually present in small quantities. Now, most of the time when organisms lay eggs, they're not in those eggs for a very, very long time. So when they say there is a small quantity of yolk, that means that those eggs will not take a long time to hatch. Okay? When it comes to ovovivipary, the yolk present in the egg, the young are independent of the mother's body. So even though they're in the mother's body, the egg is inside, the developing embryo is inside the mother's body, in the egg, it's not part of the mother's body because there's no uterus. It's just an egg growing inside the mother's body. The mother doesn't supply it with nutrients or anything like that. But when it comes to vivipary, we know that even as in humans, there is a placenta. So the young receive the nutrition from the mother's body through the placenta, a very, very important organ. And then the type of egg, in ovipary, it's jelly-like or calcareous. Most of the time, it's calcareous because, or calcareous, because it needs to be hard to protect it against the outside environment. And then in ovovivipary, it is calcareous or leathery. Most of the time, it's leathery, like as in with the shark, so that they can, so that it's easier to house inside the female's body. And in vivipary, there is no type of egg there, okay? So that is why when I said you must refer to the female gamete as an ovum, that is the most correct. You cannot say the female has an egg in a human, because as you can see, it's going to be incorrect based on our knowledge that we've just learned now. So there's advantages and disadvantages to ovipary and ovovivipary. Okay, so let's look at these diagrams. Now we can see a turtle hatching here, and this turtle, you can see that the turtle is much bigger. So which means that it's already ready to go on with life. It's like it's hatching and it's ready to feed, it's ready to move. You can see it can move because it pushed out of that shell. So the advantages of ovipary and vivipary is that eggs and sperm cells are produced in large numbers to increase chances of survival in adulthood. So you'll see a fish will lay thousands of eggs, just so that it can be sure that one of them is going to be fertilized. Parental care ensures survival to adulthood, and the young one is protected from the cold and predators to ensure survival. So here we're talking about ovovivipary, where the young are born and hatched within the female's body. Let's talk about embryonic development, vivipary. Now we're talking about you. This is how things happen. There is the embryo developing inside the mother's body, and as you can see, it is attached to the placenta, and the placenta gives nutrients, okay? And there's the baby being born alive, and there's no egg, there's no sign of any egg or anything like that. So that is definitely vivipary. The advantages of vivipary is development occurs within the mother's body, very important. And if it's within the mother's body, that means it's going to be protected and it's going to get nutrients, which what it needs to survive. The parental care increases chances of survival of the young. And the disadvantages is the number of offspring produced is few. Yes, back in the day, our grandparents and our great-grandparents, maybe 14, 15 children in a family. Yes, that really was the case. These days, the number of offspring is few because the lifestyle has changed. More energy is used to provide parental care. So, like when you were younger, your parents had to feed you, and then when you learned to crawl, they had to watch that you were not knocking into something or hurting yourself or stabbing yourself or doing all those sorts of things. So it takes energy to do all of that, to protect you. So that is the energy they are talking about. And then here now we're going to zone in. We spoke about the amniotic egg. Remember, we spoke about the amniotic egg as a form of nutrition and helping the developing embryo to survive. Because remember, in the amniotic egg, it's not within the uterus of the female. This embryo has to survive on its own. So it has various parts which all have a very, very important role. So the embryo develops inside the amnion. So there's the amnion. There's the amnion here, okay? And if you look at it, it's protected by many membranes and hard shell. That purpose is obvious. It's for protection. The amniotic fluid protects the embryo from drying out. So when we look at the amniotic fluid, it fills the entire structure because the organism the embryo needs to be moist. Why does it need to be moist? Because all the nutrients are dissolved in the liquid. All the waste moves through the liquid, okay? And then it feeds from the yolk. So it feeds from the yolk as well as the allantois removes metabolic waste. So this is very, very important, because if the allantois was not there, and there was an accumulation of waste, it would become toxic and the embryo would die. Okay? The chorion supplies, very, very important, the chorion. It supplies oxygen, food, and water. Do you see how important the chorion is? Okay? So those are the components of an amniotic egg and how it helps the embryo to survive. Now let's talk about two types of development. One is called precocial and the other one is called altricial. So let's talk about precocial. So when we are talking about these two types of development, so some organisms, you'll notice when they are born or when they are hatched or whatever the case may be, some of them are born and they are prepared, they are like ready to go. Eyes are open, they are mobile, they can move, they can hunt. I mean, think about snakes. When the baby snake hatches, it slithers out of that shell or it slithers out of the body, and what does it do? It immediately goes on the hunt. It doesn't need to be protected. It doesn't need the mommy snake to help it to look for food. It's already ready. So it has everything that it needs to survive. But then if you look on the opposite end, maybe there is a newborn bird, and this bird is born with its eyes closed. It can't move. It doesn't have feathers to keep it warm. Do you think it will be able to survive? No, it won't be able to survive. So that is where precocial and altricial comes into comparison. So let's look at altricial first before we go to precocial. If you look at altricial, I want you to remember this as all. All. So what does it mean? It needs all the help it can get. It needs all the help it can get. Look at that helpless little baby, okay? In altricial development, the young ones are unable to move after birth and they are helpless. So even when the doctor takes the baby out, the baby can't just get up and walk around and say, okay, where's the food, where's the fridge? No, it needs help, okay, to be fed. They do not have feathers or birds. Even for example, a baby, even if the baby is feeling cold, can he talk? No, he can't talk. So it's up to the parents to keep the baby warm. So that is altricial. They also need to be fed and kept warm. So altricial, they need all the necessities from their parents. So is that how you're going to remember it? Altricial, all. Now, precocial. Let's see what is precocial. When they hatch, their eyes are open. Their bodies are covered with soft feathers. So it sounds like they are prepared. So we're going to say precocial, prepared. Precocial, prepared. Okay? So altricial, they need all the help they can get from their parents. Okay? Precocial, they are prepared. So when they are born or when they are hatched, okay, their eyes are open. They have feathers to keep them warm. They're able to move. They are able to hunt. So they're able to be independent and they're able to survive. They're able to move soon after they are hatched. As you can see, there is the ostrich. And look at those little baby ostriches. They are able to move. They can run. If you chase it, it's going to run. It's not just going to stand there. They're able to feed themselves and they're independent of their parents. Okay? Which you will be also one day. You'll be very independent. But for now, you need all the help you can get. Okay? So if we compare the two, we know that the young are highly developed in precocial and they're able to move about and feed themselves. In altricial, where they need all, they are immature and they need a lot of parental care. So how are you going to remember this? You're going to use your mnemonics. You're going to see what the word starts with, and you're also going to use everyday examples to remember the concept, because that is how you are going to remember and be able to remember the facts and apply it in the exam. Okay? So with regard to parental care, what is parental care? Obviously, it comes from the word parent. It's basically how much or how little care an organism needs from its parents. It refers to looking after young ones through feeding, keeping them warm, and protecting them from predators. Such animals give rise to few offspring, because think about it, it makes sense. If the parents are going to be looking after the offspring and they need to give them food, they need to protect them, if they have fewer offspring, they're able to do it successfully. But if you have so many offspring, are you going to be able to give everyone that protection and that care and a good amount of food? No. So therefore, it actually works in the advantage of the mammals and the birds and so forth. So when we return, my colleague Agnes is going to touch on the advantages of external fertilization and internal fertilization, and do some exam questions with you. And this is really going to help you to determine whether or not you actually understand the concept, because studying is not just reading the notes or understanding the concept. Studying and doing well in the exam equals to being able to interpret the questions and understand the question and know what is required of the question. So we're going to take a few minutes break, and we're going to return with the second half of this presentation. So don't leave. Thank you.
Good day, grade 12 learners, and welcome back to our last minutes of the session where we'll be doing reproduction in vertebrates, So this is one of the resources that we usually emphasize that you need to use so that you get good marks. So Mind the Gap is very, very useful if you use it very well. Now I'm going to summarize the reproductive strategies using the guidelines on page 17 of Mind the Gap, right? Now, the first strategy that we are going to look at is external fertilization. Remember, this is a summary because my colleague has already taught about all of these strategies. So I'm summarizing, looking at Mind the Gap on page 17. Okay, so external fertilization, what it is, remember Samantha mentioned that it requires water to take place, right? So for external fertilization, it takes place outside the body of a female. So it takes place outside the body of the female and usually where? In water. Think of the fish, right? And then what is its advantage? Its advantage is that water will prevent eggs from drying out, because once they dry out, obviously we're not expecting any fertilization to take place. Now water again has got an advantage to the external fertilization. In which way? It helps the eggs from drying out and also allows sperm to swim towards the egg. So if it was not water, obviously we're not expecting any fertilization to take place because the sperm cell won't swim towards the egg or the ova, right? Now going to internal fertilization, comparing internal fertilization to external. Now with internal fertilization, it takes place within the body of a female. Now with internal fertilization, that's where we need organs, that is reproductive organs. We need the female reproductive organ. We need the male reproductive organ for internal fertilization to take place. Now what actually happens there? How is it working? The male is going to deposit the sperm inside reproductive organ of the female, right? So you need to take a note of that. For internal fertilization to take place, that's where we need what? The reproductive organs from both the male and the female, whereby the male will deposit the sperm cell inside the reproductive organ of the female. Then fertilization will take place. So we say fertilization takes place or it occurs inside the female's reproductive organ. We will learn later on when we'll be doing human reproduction where exactly is internal fertilization take place when we look at what? At human beings, for an example, right? So later on we will learn where exactly does it take place. Now, what is the advantage of internal fertilization? It allows terrestrial animals that are living on land, right, to reproduce in a dry environment. Remember, we don't need water. We don't need to be inside the water for fertilization to take place as animals, right? Because with external, we gave an example of fish there, right? And then it allows terrestrial animals to reproduce in dry environment without the need of what? The need for water. Then with internal fertilization, we are sure, we are certain that fertilization will take place. But if we compare it to external fertilization, we are not even sure. Yes, a fish might lay those million eggs inside the water, but we are not sure if sperm cells will fertilize those. But with internal fertilization, because that's where the male organ insert the sperm cells inside the female's reproductive organ. Hence, we are saying somewhere internally, that is in the fallopian tube, that's where we are expecting fertilization to be taking place in humans, for that matter. Right, now, another strategy we've got, ovipary. How does it occur? How does it happen? How does it work? So, eggs are laid and hatching take place outside the mother's body, right? Then, what is the advantage of ovipary? Eggs provide nutrition for the developing embryo, and it protects the embryo as well. So the eggs provide what? Nutrition. Remember, once we have got fertilization taking place, we are expecting what? A zygote to be formed. Then we'll be having those developmental stages. But then with those developmental stages, now those will need what? Nutrition for development to take place. So the embryo needs to develop and grow, right? A shelled egg frees these animals from the need to reproduce in water. Okay, another strategy, we've got vivipary, right? Like Samantha has explained how you can remember those terms. So vivipary, how does it work? The young develop inside the uterus. Remember, we've spoken about internal fertilization taking place inside the female's body. So how does that happen? We're saying the young one develops inside the uterus of the mother after eggs are being fertilized internally. Okay? Now, what is the advantage of that? It is more efficient development of the embryo as nutrients are received for a longer period. Think of a human being. For those 9 months, for those, I'll take it from 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. At that time, birth can happen, right? Now, what we are saying, nutrients are received for a longer period, meaning that developing embryo needs to get nourished, okay? Now, nutrients are received for a longer period from the mother's blood through the placenta. Therefore, embryo is protected in the body of the mother. You are going to learn more when we're doing human reproduction on how does that happen. So the developing baby, the developing embryo is well protected. That's nature again, right? Now let's look at the other strategy, which is ovovivipary. Now with ovovivipary, how does it work? According to Mind the Gap, as we summarize it, the young one develop from eggs that are fertilized internally and retained within the mother's body after fertilization until they hatch, until they move out of the shells. Right. Now, what is the advantage of ovovivipary? The advantage is that embryos obtain their nutrients from the egg yolk. Remember, we've also looked at the structure of the egg there. Samantha did it with you. So you need to know the parts and their functions. Okay, so we're saying the embryo obtained their nutrients from the egg yolk. Remember, we looked at the egg yolk and also the albumin there. The eggs are protected from predators until hatching occurs. Remember, as eggs are there, we can have predators, those enemies that can actually destroy the developing embryos. Okay, right. Next strategy we'll be having, what you need to know is the amniote egg. How does it work there? Embryos are protected by the shell egg, So the shell is hard in nature and it protects the inner parts, okay? The egg consists of many membranes and each membrane has got its function. For an example, we've got the amniote egg that protects the egg from dehydration from drying out. We've got, you also need to know the functions of the following: the yolk sac, the allantois, those are the membranes, the chorions. So when you think of the egg, think of those membranes. You need to know their functions. Now, one of them, the yolk sac. Remember how it works? We're saying it is protected by what? Or it consists of what? Many extra embryonic membranes. So we'll be looking at membranes such as yolk sac. What is the function of the yolk sac? It provides nutrition, right? And then we've got the allantois. It is for excretion. Remember, excretion need to take place, nutrition need to take place, and also gaseous exchange need to take place where? To the developing embryo. So allantois is for excretion of waste products, and then we've got the chorion, which is responsible for the gaseous exchange. Okay, now the next one is precocial development. Precocial development. Now there, hatchlings are quite well developed when they hatch. For an example, if we look at these ducklings, right? They've got their eyes open, they can move. That is after hatchling has taken place. So hatchlings are quite well developed when they hatch. Their eyes are open, they are able to move, they are able to feed, they are dependent in other ways. They don't depend on what? On the parents. Right? So we are saying with precocial development, hatchlings are quite well developed. They've got eyes open, they are able to move, unlike if we compare with in case of the humans. You, for an example, when you were 1 day old, were you able to move? Yes, it will be those natural movements of stretching, but in terms of movement, you can't walk at that period. So it goes with developmental stages. From this age, you can crawl. From this age, you can walk. Today, you are young adults. You are 16, 17, you can do things on your own, though as parents, you still depend on what? On parents. We are still protecting you. We are locking the gates at 6 o'clock. How about that one? But as parents, you are overprotective of the young ones. Like we mentioned with the other animals, is human being, the chimpanzee, we're taking care of the young ones. We are overprotective. Okay. Now, precocial, they are able to move, they are able to feed, the brain size and intelligence remains the same throughout their lives. What is the advantage of precocial development? Hatchlings are more prepared to handle the challenges of the environment. They are more independent. They don't depend on parents. They are more independent. They can move on their own without the help of their parents or the adults. Okay, now we're looking at the following strategy, altricial development. Now with altricial development, how does it work? Now, in this case, hatchlings are poorly developed when they hatch, poorly developed. They are unable to feed on their own. They cannot move. I'm going to give an example of you just after birth. Just after parents give birth to you, what happens? There's a lot of parental care there. They feed you, they breastfeed you. We're making sure that you wear warm clothing, you know. So parental care there is 100%. So altricial development, unable to feed on their own, you are a better example there. Cannot move at birth. Brain size and intelligence increases a lot after hatchling. Okay? Now, what is the advantage of altricial development? parental care afforded to protect the young one from predators. So you are going to be protected by the adults. You are going to be protected by the parents from predators. So with predators, yes, we can liken that to enemies, for an example, right? Let's look at parental care, as the latter presenter mentioned and explained on that one. Now, parental care is offered through the building of nests. This, in the cases of the birds, for an example, they will prepare the nest for the young ones, right? They protecting the eggs as well from predators, right? They protecting the young one, teaching the young one. Yes. Now, animals have got their way of teaching their young ones. Yes, we also teaching you even on how to speak your mother tongue. Yes, you are being taught throughout your developmental stages until you cannot depend on the parents, right? And what is the advantage of parental care? You can ask yourself, why are we taking care of you as parents? What is the advantage of parental care? It increases chances of survival. Imagine if I give birth and just leave that young infant, young child. Just throw them on in the dustbins, or just ignore them, avoid them, and not help them. Chances of the survival are so slim. So the advantage of parental care, it increases chances of survival of the young ones. All right. Now I'm going to take you through some questions. So these are possible exam questions, but this does not mean the questions are going to be repeated exactly the way they appear from these past papers. So what you need to know is that given the question, you should be able to have the techniques of answering those questions. Yes, you are going to be given scenarios, case studies. So what is important? You need to read with understanding, because most of the questions you're going to get the answers from the paragraphs that are given, or from the case studies that are given, or from the investigations that are given. So you need to read with understanding, girls and boys. Now, the first question, let's read through this scenario and then attempt the 3 questions. So the bluefin tuna, the great white shark, and the bottlenose dolphin are 3 aquatic species. Already you know the type of fertilization taking place there. You must analyze quickly as you are reading to just guess what could be the question, what could be the answer, right? An adult bluefin releases up to 540 million eggs into the water annually, that is in a year, while the great white shark female produces 2 to 12 offspring through ovovivipary. We have learned about that strategy, its advantages and how it works. 2 to 12 offspring through ovovivipary every 2 years, right? A bottlenose dolphin female, being a mammal, is vivipary. So many strategies there, and produces 1 offspring every 2 to 3 years, right? Name the type of fertilization that takes place in the bottlenose dolphin. It comes from the case study there. The type of fertilization is internal, okay? Explain how 2 of the reproductive strategies of the great white shark increases the reproductive success. Remember, for reproduction to be a success, we have learned of internal fertilization, external fertilization. How does it happen? Remember, external requires water. We have learned all about that. So if you are to explain how the reproductive strategies of the great white shark increases in its reproductive success, what should you say? Internal fertilization, yes. Remember, when you explain, you're giving what? The cause and the effect. So internal fertilization increases the chances of what? Fertilization. Remember, number 2 is a follow-up to question number 1, right? So explain how 2 of the reproductive strategies of the great white shark increases its reproductive success. So it's internal fertilization because it increases the chances of what? Fertilization. Then ovovivipary, eggs retained inside the female's body for better protection from the predators or from the harsh environments, right? Explain one reason why bluefin tuna releases large number of eggs. From the case study, we have learned that for the bluefin to release a large number of eggs, that happens in order to increase what? Chances of fertilization. So if more eggs are laid, it increases chances of fertilization, opposed to whether when just few eggs are being released at a time. So large number of eggs produced leads to what? To increased chances of what? Fertilization, since there is external fertilization. Think of the fish. That was a better example we could give in terms of the external fertilization that takes place because of what? Of water, which is the environment inside water, right? So explain why the bluefin tuna releases a large number of eggs. That happens because it increases the what? The survival of the eggs or the number of offspring, as eggs may be lost to predators or environmental factors. Remember, more of those are being released. Quite a number of eggs are being released. Where we are saying more of those eggs being released, they increase chances of what? They increases chances of fertilization to take place, right? So also, if we've got more of them being increased, it means it also increases the survival of the eggs. So they might not all die, but we can still be having some where fertilization can take place. And also, if more are being laid, yes, eggs, some of the eggs might be lost due to what? To predators. So it's important to understand that the chances, the more we've got releasing of large eggs there, it means some can be fertilized, some can be lost due to what? Predators. But yes, we know for the fact that they are being released in large numbers, it means some can be fertilized. Right, this is question 2 from Gauteng Prelim paper 1 of 2022. So most of the times we are emphasizing that you can compare questions from different past papers. So this is Gauteng Prelim paper of 2022. Remember, this is our paper 1. So let's look at the following scenario. The diagram below shows the internal structure of an amniotic egg. Remember, I've indicated when I started that with the amniotic egg, you need to know those layers, the membranes, you need to know their functions, right? So this is the structure of the amniotic egg. The diagram shows the internal structure of an amniotic egg after fertilization has taken place, as well as the chick that hatched from the egg. Here is the chick that hatched from the egg. At least with life sciences, we give you diagrams that you can relate to, or we give you diagrams that will assist you when you answer those questions, right? The first question, name the type of fertilization that has taken place there. It is internal fertilization. Remember, with internal fertilization, you need both the male and the female reproductive organs, right? State the type of reproductive strategy which is shown by the development of the embryo within the amniotic egg. The type of reproductive strategy is ovipary, so it's important to understand, to differentiate between those types of reproductive strategies, right? Remember, for this topic, reproduction in vertebrates, it carries 8 marks of paper 1. Okay, so these are just the questions that are going to assist you to get those 8 marks. Hence, I took these questions from different past papers. So identify the type of development that the hatched chick shows. This is the hatched chick. It shows altricial development. Remember, we have spoken about the altricial development, differentiating it from the precocial development. Are they born alive? Yes. Their eyes, can they move? Ask yourself those questions. Give 2 functions of the amniotic fluid. Now, with the amniotic fluid, it protects the fetus against shock, against mechanical injuries. Let's say I'm pregnant. I've got that baby growing in my tummy, and I happen to fall. Will that child die? No. Why? Because we've got amniotic fluid in there. Right, we are going to do human reproduction. You'll understand that better as we'll be doing that. So that developing fetus is well protected, So give 2 functions of the amniotic fluid. It protects the fetus against what? Shock. Against what? Mechanical injuries. You know, you can even take maybe dangerous, poisonous substances while pregnant, but that baby is likely to be protected. Okay? So the function of the amniotic fluid, it keeps the fetus moist, protect the fetus from drying out. The other function, it protects the fetus, the amniotic fluid protects the fetus from temperature changes, whether it's cold, it's hot, it's raining, it's too sunny. As a pregnant mother or as a pregnant woman, the fetus in me can survive those changes in temperatures. All right, and then the last one, amniotic fluid, it allows the fetus to move freely. Remember, in our second bulletin, we've said it keeps the fetus moist. Therefore, it also allows the fetus to move freely. The fluid will help the fetus to move freely, or it supports the body of the fetus during development so that it allows for those developmental stages. Remember, that developing fetus cannot be the very same size from day 1 up to the last day. All right, so this is for 2 marks, any of those. So what I would advise you to do, you start with the ones that you are sure of, so that should you lose marks, you lose marks maybe on your last ones. So if it's 2 marks, be sure that the first 2 are correct and you are not taking a guess, because you might lose marks there. Right, continue with prelim paper 1 of 2022. The diagram below shows the internal structure of amniotic egg after fertilization, as well as the chick that hatched from the cell. Right. Yes, you're not going to give you those simple questions only. You also need to get those application questions. So explain how the size of the yolk sac, this is the yolk sac, right? This is the label of the yolk sac, as you can see. Explain the size of the yolk sac. Explain how the size of the yolk sac affects the development of the chick in the diagram. So for 3 marks, the yolk sac was smaller. We're talking about the yolk sac, remember? You're explaining how the size of the yolk sac affects the development of the cheek in the diagram, right? So the yolk sac was smaller, right, initially. Therefore, the cheek receives, the yolk sac was smaller, therefore it received less nutrients because it was smaller. It received less nutrients in the form of yolk, then it is less developed. It's smaller, right? It is less developed, it is underdeveloped, eyes are closed, or it has only down feathers, has no feathers, cannot walk, it shows altricial development. So if you are to explain the size here, you also relate it to what? To the developing cheek. So you respond on what is given here. You're giving the amniotic egg, you're giving the hatched cheek. So you're explaining how the size of the yolk sac affects the development of the cheek, right, in this diagram. So mostly when you asked or you are given diagrams, what you need to do, you must answer based on what is given, not on generic. Right, this is the next question from DBE November paper 1 of 2022. The anchovy is a type of fish found in the Pacific Ocean. During the breeding season, the females and females gather in large groups and release the ova and semen into the water. Already you can guess the type of fertilization there. Right, once fertilized, the eggs float in the water and embryonic development occurs until hatching. The northern pikefish is found mainly in the rivers. During the breeding season, the female releases thousands of ova and the male releases semen all around the female, right? The fertilized eggs are attached to vegetation near the riverbed where embryonic development occurs until hatching. The graph will, we are also given the graph, right? The graph below shows the survival rate of both fish species. So later on we will be looking at the graph there. Name the type of fertilization that take place in both fish. It is external because from the information given, it is taking place where? In the water. We also given the type of fish there. So laying of eggs, depositing of sperm cells takes place where? In the water. So the type of fertilization is external. Explain why both fishes are oviparous. Is because their embryos develop inside the eggs. The embryo develops inside the egg, which are laid or they hatch outside the body of the female. Okay, describe 2 ways in which the chances of fertilization are increased in the northern pikefish. So if you get stuck, you go back to the scenario that is given and refer. All right. So if you are to describe 2 ways in which the chances of fertilization are increased, remember, in water, the fish would lay many as number of eggs. Okay, so describe ways in which chances of fertilization are increased in the northern pike fish. The males release semen all around the female when she releases the eggs, right? So the female will release the eggs and then the male will release the semen around the female. Okay, then a large number of gametes or eggs are going to be produced. Right, these are the 2 graphs, graph X and Y. You need to read the caption. From the caption, you can get your variables there, right? So you quickly study what is given there. Which graph X or Y represent the survival rate of the northern pikefish for 1 mark? Obviously, you study those two graphs, and then you study and check, compare the two, which one will have the highest rates there. So which graph, X or Y, represent the survival rate of the northern pikefish, right? It is graph X. It represents the survival rate of the northern pikefish. This will be our graph. Explain your answer. Why X? It is because, why this graph? Why this one? It is because they have a higher number of surviving embryos. Higher number of surviving embryos, right? And then, because their fertilized eggs are attached to the vegetation and where they are protected from predators or washing away, right? So we are saying we're going to have higher number of surviving embryos because of what? They are attached to the vegetation in which they are found. They are also protected from predators. Remember, once they are not protected from the predators, they can be easily be destroyed. Right? KZN Prelim, paper 1 of 2023. This is the same scenario, reproduction in vertebrates. Right, let's read the following passage. Reproduction in crocodiles in the wild. Crocodiles in the wild. All crocodiles lay hard-shelled fertilized egg, right? A female lays an average of 12 to 14 eggs per nest. The eggs are deposited into the soil, and the sun's heat and heat from the natural decomposition of vegetation maintain warm temperature that aids the development of the embryo, okay? Until hatching occurs, the female usually remains close to the nest to protect the eggs from predators. So all the adults parents, they are overprotective of the young ones. In this case, this crocodile is protecting the eggs from predators. So until hatching occurs, the female usually remains close to the nest to protect the eggs from predators, right? Now, after 2 or 3 months, the young are fully developed and ready to hatch. After 2 to 3 months, the young ones are fully developed and ready to hatch. While still in the egg, the young may utter squeaks, perhaps signaling that they are ready to emerge. That's nature, huh? They perhaps utter those signaling to show maybe the adult crocodile, the female one that is overprotective. They are signaling that they are ready to emerge. The adult female removes the dead or other debris from the eggs and assists the hatchling to the water. Very, very interesting, right? In many cases, the female then opens the egg carefully, right? Remember, eggs were laid there. They were even protected from the predators. They signaling that they are ready to hatch out, right? Then the female opens the egg carefully with her tongue and carries the hatchling in her mouth, right? The female remains close to the offspring and provide protection from predators for several weeks. This is also parental care. State whether crocodiles have internal or external fertilization. Can you guess, girls and boys? And that is internal fertilization. Okay, due to what we've just read. Explain 2 ways in which the type of fertilization named here increases the reproductive success in crocodiles. So, sperms are deposited inside the female body. Immediately when you talk about a female and male reproductive organs. Think of what? Internal fertilization. So sperms are deposited inside the female body, which increases the chances of what? Fertilization, right? Then protection provided by the mother's body decreases mortality rate. It decreases the death rate. Okay? So once you, as a female, once you protect the developing embryo, that increases what? Chances of survival. Okay? Right. Name the type of reproductive strategy in crocodiles which relates to the nourishment and protection of the developing embryo. So here, for 1 mark, you just name the type of reproductive strategy, and we're saying it's ovipary, right? Name 2 ways mentioned in the passage. You go back to the passage. 2 ways that are mentioned, which indicates that crocodile have parental care, right? Now, those ways comes from the case study that was given. Name 2 ways mentioned in the passage, right? So it refers to the passage, which indicates that crocodiles have parental care. It removes the debris from the egg. Remember, we've said it uses what? You go back, it opens the egg carefully with the tongue and even carries the hatchling, or, you know, that parental care indicates that the young ones are protected. The young ones still depend on their parents for survival. So it removes the debris from the egg, assists the hatchling to the water, opens the egg carefully with her tongue, carries the hatchling in her mouth. That's very, very interesting. That is for 2 marks. So you can mention any that you get from the passage, right? Gauteng Prelim Paper 1 of 2023. Hence, we are emphasizing that you get those papers, like from now on, you'll be looking at 2025, the May paper. You also need to study the pattern of asking questions in that paper. Right. So Gauteng Prelim Paper 1 of 2023, I know most of you have done this activity. I've witnessed that in your classwork books. You have this activity already and you already know the answers. Hence, we are saying compare and just study the pattern, the way questions are being asked, the way you can actually respond. In some frog species, during mating, the male climbs onto the back of the female and grabs her with his front legs. During this time, the female will release about 6,000 ova, while the male releases sperm onto them. Okay, this mating behavior is called amplexus. Right. Also, my colleague mentioned the mating behaviors where courtship takes place, where different animals behave or attract the opposite sex for the mating to take place. So this mating is called amplexus. Name the type of fertilization that occurs during reproduction in frogs for 1 mark. Can you give me that answers? I know you know it by now. This is external fertilization. Explain why the fertilized eggs of these frogs do not survive on land. It's because the eggs will dry out. That is on land, because they have no shells. They are not amniotic eggs, and they have no amnion. Remember, frogs can live on land or in water. Okay? Right, Prelim Paper 1 of 2023. Explain how amplexus increases the chances of fertilization in frogs for 2 marks. Remember, we have indicated that this will be your male, this is your female, right? Explain how the amplexus increases the chances of fertilization in frogs. So the male and female bodies are in close contact. and this increases chances of fertilization. And then sperm cells can be released directly onto the ova, so it increases the chances of fertilization. So you respond looking on what you are given, right? Unlike in the fish, when we were looking at chances of how we were explaining the increase of chances of fertilization in fish, for an example, it will lay many eggs, then some will be fertilized, some might be predated on, right? But then with this one, where the male and female body are in close contact, we are expecting that sperm can be released directly onto the ova, or many up to 6,000 ova are released since fertilization is external. Okay? Right, from the information above, remember you are given the information. Explain one other strategy that contributes to the reproduction success of the frog species. Explain one other strategy that contributes to reproductive success of the frog. So according from the case study given, many ova are released, or up to that 6,000, since fertilization is external, increasing the chance that some will be fertilized, some, because many are laid there. Or the male and female bodies are in close contact like this one, so the sperm can be released directly into the ova. So you've got many options. You either can talk to the ova that are released, the chances of the increasing chance of fertilization due to how many number of ova are laid there. Or you can say because the two bodies, the male and female bodies, are in close contact. So meaning if they are in close contact, the sperm can be released directly way onto the ova. Then we are sure that fertilization there will take place. Thank you so much. So I'm going to advise you that before, I know some of you have started with human reproduction, but make sure that you can attempt a set, maybe 2 papers from different years to just answer on this reproduction in vertebrates or reproductive strategies. You know, what terminologies that you need to know, the fertilization, differences between fertilization, internal and external fertilization, types of those strategies, the vivipary, ovovivipary, the vivipary, you need to also know their examples. Right, good luck as you are busy studying the human reproduction. Make sure that you learn those terms again. See you next time. Thank you and goodbye.